Austin, how are you doing, man?
Good. How's it going? I should have OU Daily DNA. Should have thrown on the hat. I have it up here, but I went with Channel 5 instead.
That's all right. I'll rock the OU Daily hat. Shout out Seth Prince. Always gotta rock the alma mater. The high school hero that I am. But Austin, you got to witness today a little bit of high school hero ness himself, and he admitted to it. You were in Norman today. Baker Mayfield was in Norman today. Not a coincidence that the two of you were there. He was holding his youth football camp. Austin, you were there with a bunch of media. It seemed like from afar that like a pretty fun day, and also the weather in Oklahoma was really nice. Uh, Curious, just what was it like today to kind of? I know that you grew up around Oklahoma football and whatnot, and now covering it for the OU Daily. Um, what was today like just in terms of Baker Mayfield's in this really weird space with his NFL career, and now he's back in Norman, and it feels like nothing's changed as far as the camp part of it. But uh, what were the vibes like? Is mostly what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it was just pretty much typical Baker, right? He's going around just throwing the ball. A bunch of little kids. Obviously, the media got to come out for a little portion and came up right front and center, right to where the media were standing. And typical Baker way, just doing is like, "Hey, come take a picture of me" thing. But talking to him was good. Really, he honestly seems like this chapter in his career. It seems like he's kind of been invited to maybe a new perspective, so to say. Obviously, probably not playing with Cleveland. He said as much today, just being like both sides pretty much have came to terms. We're not really going to do anything together anymore. And yeah, I mean, he talked about how, it's pretty frustrating not being able to know where his next stop is, but he's just trying to control what he can. And honestly, from his demeanor that he talked about, he seemed pretty okay with where he's at right now, and just sort of trying to use this as, okay, let's, start chapter two.
Which is it's weird just because I think the city of Norman, and you could probably speak to this as well, really became a Brownstown. Like, I mean, finding a Baker Mayfield jersey was very easy to do in Norman and kind of consume the culture. And now that he is kind of in this purgatory of sorts where he's trying to figure out what's next for him in his career. Meanwhile, Deshaun Watson is, waiting to hear his punishment from the NFL. So really fun and a not so fun way of juxtaposing those two things of happening between the Cleveland Brown quarterbacks. But it is weird just kind of seeing this guy that I think that throughout his Oklahoma career had setbacks, nothing too major, but has kind of led a pretty like a steady incline of like getting to this place where, he's this walk on making his way up to number one draft pick, and didn't quite work out in Cleveland. I think that the way that many of us maybe thought it would, just kind of based on the early success. But as he kind of moves forward, it seems like he's fairly at peace with it. I mean, I think, we know how Baker kind of takes things, and maybe he's grown up. Maybe like I just can't imagine the first time that he plays Cleveland. I feel like that's going to be must watch TV. But just overall, though, just you spoke with him as well after the spring game. A lot of the media did as well. Uh, but just as he kind of goes through this process, I mean, does did you still get that kind of, when I reference like kind of the setbacks and kind of the chip on his shoulder, do you still get that sense about him that he's still kind of that guy that is kind of going into this with something to prove, still has that chip on his shoulder?
I think it's more of like a controlled Baker, so to say. Obviously it's Baker Mayfield. He's going to have the chip on his shoulder or be the guy that, is chirping at people or whatever. But it seems like he's sort of holding it back a little bit almost. It's, talking to him, he was like, "Are there hard feelings from you in Cleveland today?" He was just like, it's not the city of Cleveland's fault. I love that place. I learned a lot there. But obviously, I think we both understand it's probably time for us to break up, I guess. But it wasn't really, it was a good answer by Baker, to be honest. Like, I wasn't something that, obviously everyone goes into this thinking Baker's going to say something, because he always says something that's probably he shouldn't say, I guess. And I think he pretty much nailed it. I feel like he's really just focused on where he's going to go next, which is pretty, obviously it's like Wow, that's Baker Mayfield saying that, but
I was going to say the thing that really, if there was anything that was surprising, and I think we all kind of know the score here as far as just Baker's future in Cleveland, because I think there are like probably a minority of fans that don't quite understand the nuance of the situation. Like, there's no way Baker can play it down for Cleveland. Like, there's just no shot of that happening. So I was, I guess, maybe a little bit maybe not surprised, but refreshed to hear Baker just kind of squash it, just as far as just like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Um, but as he kind of goes through these, I mean, or the past few months, I should say, I mean, it's just it's hard to get a good read on where this guy's going to go, and especially the way that like the teams that needed quarterbacks drafted. I thought Carolina would be one of them. Desmond Ritter was drafted by them. I think they got another quarterback in the draft. So uh, does not look like that will happen. Pittsburgh seems like not a possibility anymore. Seattle is kind of the one for people that follow NFL rumors, and I'm really not one of them. But the big rumor, I guess, right now is that Seattle and Cleveland are engaged on on trade talks. And not to age the crowd, do you remember Pete Carroll and USC and its dominance? Because the thought of a Baker Mayfield, as Oklahoma as he is, getting paired up with Pete Carroll is just kind of insane to me. It would honestly be like Baker playing for Mac Brown. Just I'm curious just what you think of just that possible pairing, if at all.
it's pretty weird. I honestly, so growing up in Norman, my really only recollection of Pete Carroll and USC. I was pretty young, but um, I just remember I have this weird memory of him just like throwing the ball with his players like early game. I'm like, that guy is pretty old doing that. But there's like a weird there's a weird reality where I feel like Pete Carroll and Baker like really hit it off. But then obviously they'd probably move on from both of them because Pete Carroll's, I'm pretty sure he's one of the top 10 oldest coaches ever in the NFL. I'm like fairly certain that's a real thing. But yeah, that's pretty weird. I'm not gonna lie. But if it's not Seattle, I don't know where else he'd be. So
I was going to say just the weapons that he would have in DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett would seem to be, you know, pretty beneficial to Baker. And this is a guy that had, Odell Beckham, had Jarvis Landry, didn't quite work, but I don't know. Maybe this is just a part of me that like, and I feel like sometimes like I'm too close to the situation because I covered him for 3 years. I wrote way too many words about Baker Mayfield, talked to too many of his family members. So like, I feel like I'm sometimes too close to it. Not trying to brag about my access by no means, but I do feel like as someone that like watched it happen, just like, or has watched his career and seen it progress, like it feel it there are times where I feel like it's a little bit unfair how things have gone. And I think with Cleveland, I don't think he did himself any favors by kind of playing through his injury last year. He did make mention there was someone that actually asked him about his shoulder on Tuesday, and he seemed like he's doing fine with everything.
yeah, he made a joke about him being able to swing the golf club pretty hard. So that was pretty typical Baker response we got there. A little fun, but just started thinking about the potential bromance between Drew Lock and Baker. I feel like those dudes either hit it off or become best friends or hate each other. I feel like there's no really in between there.
I the way I remember Baker kind of embracing a lot of the other quarterbacks was very unique. I think for the time, because I think we all kind of assumed that at the college football level, like if you're not the starter, you probably hate the starter. But I think Baker did a really good job of like embracing. I just remember him and Austin Kendall getting along really well. And I don't know what that says about them, but just they got along really well. And I think that him and Kyler had a pretty good relationship, at least, a kind of a, public image of what we saw. I don't, say what you will. This is not me disparaging either of those two guys, but you get two number one draft picks in the same room. I think it's fair to say there's going to be a little bit of, like, I'm sure during the 2017 season, Kyler Murray was probably like, I should probably be on the field a little bit more than I am. But I think that Baker and Drew Lock could be a real stepbrother situation. And I think that could be a real, just like they meet each other. It's kind of, I mean, it's going to be a competition for. I don't think that a Baker, wherever he goes, is necessarily guaranteed the starting job, just because I think that the coach of whatever franchise he goes to is going to try to at least pose it as that, just because that's how football coaches are. But I could see him and Drew Lock getting along really well, and especially like if they have any shared hatred, I mean, they could just vent about Tom Herman. There's plenty of things for him and Drew Lock to talk about, I think.
I just like the thought of Baker not being a starter is so weird, knowing that so much of his personality is being like the face of the team or the face of the franchise, sort of like the Browns. And then I don't know if is he still Baker if he's a backup? Like, does he take a step back in his like demeanor and how he acts on the field? I'm not sure. It would be something to see, but that's something I'd obviously be super interested to see if he is a backup. I'd imagine if he goes to Seattle, he'd obviously probably end up starting, but
I want to make it clear. If he goes to Seattle, I think he will be the starter. I think that in almost a Lincoln Riley sense, the coach will just try to fake a quarterback competition that doesn't actually exist. And I mean, honestly, Baker went through that when he first got to the NFL with Tyrod Taylor. I think everyone kind of knew, and Tyrod Taylor is not a bad quarterback by any means, but it felt weird to take your number one draft pick and essentially try to give him a redshirt year when there's really no proof of concept with anything else that you have as the Cleveland Browns. Like, I think with Patrick Mahomes took an extra year, but I mean, he had a really good mentor, and I'm not saying that Tyrod Taylor wasn't, but like did not have a veteran of the caliber of an Alex Smith. So it would be weird to see him be a backup. It would be very, very strange, and it really makes me think about like how different like my time at like the OU Daily and your time at the OU Daily so different, because like for me it was just like Baker, 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 and it made the job very easy. You've had a much different experience as far as covering OU football than most. Baker still talks very highly of Oklahoma. Kind of gave the pretty typical responses what you would expect from him, but seems like him and Brent have a decent relationship, and that will continue. Like his presence with OU, it does not seem like he's going to stop coming to Norman, stop coming to OU games. It seems like he's going to be very involved.
Yeah, I mean, BV is pretty clearly put a definite emphasis on connecting with alums and former players, and Baker's recency is pretty much atop that list there with Kyler and some of the other guys. But just by what he did at the spring game, Brent bringing in everyone, and Baker sort of being the forefront of that. Obviously, Baker brought up getting to talk with the team before the spring game. And so they met. They said they talked for about 30 minutes and didn't talk about anything other than just really life, which is honestly been Brent's biggest thing, I guess, just building his team that he wants since he's taken the job. So those two definitely hit it off. It's definitely a little bit different, obviously, knowing how close Baker and Lincoln were. But it seems like Baker's kind of a program guy, not necessarily just a Lincoln guy.
I mean, that was always going to be the thing that I imagined was going to be telling about the relationships of some of the Lincoln Riley era quarterbacks. I never thought that Baker Mayfield would necessarily back off of his loyalty because he grew up a fan, but you always kind of wonder if a guy like Kyler Murray, who transferred in, played only one season, like if he's, going to be super involved. And he seems like I mean, of all the guys, like he seems as supportive as any of the alums, just like pumping up the program and being there. He was there for Baker. I would imagine Baker will be there next year for Kyler Murray's statue reveal, if that is the timeline. That I imagine that like someone at OU probably got like was probably not a super big fan of Baker just like putting that out there, but it does feel like Baker statues took so much time. It would be cool to see again like a year later to like have all of the Kyler content, because following the Baker stuff, especially in like kind of in the aftermath of Lincoln Riley's departure, Brent Venables coming, just a lot of things, a lot of chaos. Like that was just kind of like, it felt normal, I guess, to an extent, because I'm sure as you've kind of dealt with and writing about stuff, that I mean, like just the fatigue around the coaching change is just. I mean, I reached it at all-time high. I feel like back in like December, like it got old really quick, but
Mhm.
it's cooled down for the most part. Um, One to kind of just, I mean, don't want to go too in depth, but as you kind of look ahead to this next season, vibes are good with OU football. I think that Brent Venables has done a good job. I know that you've kind of outlined a lot of the just kind of the changes that have gone on with the program and kind of making it into what could possibly be a really good team by the time they get to the SEC, or when I say that, just a program that's built for the SEC whenever that comes. But as you kind of look at 2022, do you have any just expectations for what's to come, or do you kind of, after a year like you had last year, it's just might be best just to not assume anything?
It's probably just best to not assume anything, but I mean, I think you can assume for the most part that this is just going to be that like building year for just to see what's different. Obviously, so many things are different. If you just look at recruiting, obviously Brent's taking that a lot much more different approach than Lincoln was. I think there's only 3 stars and 1 5-star in this next class, 2023 class, but it's a little off topic. But obviously, it just is kind of weird to see. You talk about Dylan Gabriel taking all of his buddies out to wherever that was, little retreat that they did. But it's just, yeah, like you said, the vibes are pretty good, from what I can tell. So I mean, it's going to be hard to ever choose OU to not have success. I imagine that they're going to have plenty of success with Brent and success this season, even though with the roster turnover, they brought in a few guys that are going to contribute. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel and just pretty much almost a whole new defense except for a few returners. But I would imagine so that it's just as almost the same as last year. Honestly, I mean, 2 losses I feel like is probably a pretty good number for them.
I was going to say, if there's a way that I kind of look at this season, and I'm curious what you kind of think about like them being the front runners for the Big 12 title, but it almost feels like in a way that last year's results and like the margin of victories that they had, I feel like that could be a very similar story in 2022. OU winning close games because I think for the most part, even with the coaching change, even with the guys that they lose, OU still has a talent advantage over a lot of teams and should be favored probably in every game. And I think that for right now, I want to say that they came out as an early favorite against Texas, but I could be wrong on that. But I think they are going to be essentially favored in every game this season. Could see it being close, just kind of like it was last year. But the thing about last year was just we all kind of thought that they were going to blow the doors off of a few teams, have a few close games, but it never felt like they really, other than TCU, I think they even then they still kind of let up some late, but I mean, I could see this being kind of a stressful season for Oklahoma, but should still kind of be the class of the Big 12, still be the team that makes it to Arlington. Is that your read on the situation?
Yeah, I would say so. Obviously, the Baylor's, I feel like that pencil in game, they return a lot. Blake Shapen, starter there. Um, I'm interested to see how Jeff Levy's offense fares against Baylor. Obviously, Dave Aranda had a lot of success against Lincoln Riley, and that was sort of almost his kryptonite, to say. So, yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. It'll be very interesting to see OU Texas, just given the amount of transfers for both teams. It seems like not quite as many. There's going to be a lot of new faces making a lot of or playing a lot of snaps for OU, and I wonder how Brent goes about sort of telling them like, this is a big rival or teaching them the history about that. Because I remember that being a thing that Lincoln did last year, is sort of giving almost like a history lesson on what that series is. And like Dylan Gabriel is going to go into the Cotton Bowl after coming from, Florida and the East Coast and probably being very overwhelmed with that whole process and that whole event. Because obviously, I think the spring game was probably the biggest crowd he's ever played in. Am I wrong? I mean, had to have been close. I'm not necessarily sure what road games he played, but what was it? 76,000 was the unofficial or official number. That has to be close. That definitely seats more than what UCF has, I'd imagine.
That's That's really nuts to think about, that being the biggest crowd that he's ever experienced.
Yeah.
I do need to. I need an intern, by the way. I need to. I'm gonna start just taking from the OU Daily. I think is what's gonna happen next. UCF. This is great podcasting, by the way. UCF football stadium capacity is 45,000. That is not that big.
Yeah. So a third or 33%, I guess.
I
I
will
don't know.
say,
Not a
and
math
I
guy.
don't. I hope just especially like I feel like um the way that we talk about OU Texas and the Cotton Bowl can be a little bit misleading. And I don't know if you meant this, and you might have. You tell me if you're just like, no, that's 100% what I meant. But like
Oh,
when you walk into the Cotton Bowl, I don't care who you are. It's an overwhelming experience
no,
because
100%.
it's so different than anything. I mean, there are big football games that I think are on par with OU Texas, but it's just so different when you walk into that stadium, still have the faint smell of corny dogs and wax beer cups in your nostrils, and you kind of look at that sea of burnt orange and crimson on each side. It's just it's and I've been to a lot of football games with people that it's like their first time going to a football game, and they're kind of enamored by the fact that, especially mostly in Norman, but like they're just like, I've never seen so much red before. But like when you go to OU Texas, it's jarring to see the kind of coordination that goes on between both fan bases to make that pageantry come alive on a yearly basis. But
It's
I
kind of,
imagine that will be a very big welcome to big time college football moment if OU Nebraska is not already that moment for Dylan Gabriel. But uh, Austin, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but you've done a great job covering OU football and getting your feet wet with last season and Lincoln Riley and whatnot. Now, kind of in the Brent Venables area, I did want to ask one thing, and it's just because the way that Lincoln Riley operated, and you kind of mentioned the history lesson he would give the team, like before OU Texas, and just kind of the overall way he operated was very unique, I think, in terms of just kind of being a very trying to almost be the CEO of OU football. And now you're kind of seeing Brent Venables bring in people to kind of be the CEO for him, kind of take care of the things that he doesn't need to delegate. Just as far as just kind of the media access and talking with Brent Venables, I mean, how I'm not trying to sound like a college course, but could you compare and contrast just how different things are between Brent Venables covering him as they were, compared to Lincoln Riley?
no, it's totally different, not just from Brent not being quite as good with Twitter and the electronic space. I think about had one of his first press conferences. It was for signing day. It was over Zoom and couldn't figure out how to unmute his phone. That was a nice little start. But
Was this
no,
the
just from
makeup
a,
Zoom?
no, this was the first Zoom. The
Okay.
makeup Zoom, yeah, it worked, but it was that. But no, I mean, he really pours out. It seems like from what I can tell is really pours everything he has into pretty much everything that he does. He's not the kind of guy to really, he doesn't care about if you're a reporter. I don't really think he cares what your job is. I think just the kind of guy that Brent is he is going to give, you the time of day, I would say. Obviously, I want to say every press conference we've had with him went over an hour. It was only scheduled for 20 to 30 minutes. It's just, he's going to keep going until he gets everything out he wants. And obviously, I think there's one time he responded to someone's question. It was like an 11-minute answer. And he's like, did that answer your question? So like, he's really just, obviously he talks about relationships and holistically developing the program. And I think he's also starting that with the media. We didn't really have a very personal relationship with Lincoln. He wasn't ever the kind of guy to stick around and maybe chit chat or whatever. And Brent's kind of done that. Just getting to meet everyone. I remember the first time I met him at his introductory press conference, he came up and shook all of our hands. He's like, what's up, guys? What's your names? What do you guys do? And so it's just a lot different. Obviously, the access, I think we're back in person, which is nice. And yeah, I think that I don't want to say the word respect, because I think Lincoln Riley respects the media to an extent, but he's a lot more personable. It's not so much calculated as to what he wants to say.
Now, did Brent know your celebrity as far as, you know, we all know what you were
he
involved with last season.
actually, this is a funny story, but Brent gets off the podium. Me and Mason, we go up and shake his hand, introduce ourselves. He's like, "You get the guys up in the with the binoculars," and I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to put a sniper up there and stop you guys. Don't do that with my program." And then he laughed it off. He's like, "No, I'm just kidding, but yeah, but don't do that."
But you could
And
kind of feel
so
that he was a little serious.
he was like, "Haha, this is my first day. This is funny, but for real, don't do that." But
But really, please never do that.
hey, he gave us a few open practices in the spring, so maybe that was his um, maybe that was his route that he chose to do it.
His token. I mean, that's how it starts, man. They butter you up, they give you full access. But
No,
and
I
I don't mean to
mean,
say this in a disparaging way, and I don't think that Brent Venables will be a bad coach for Oklahoma. I think at worst this program will be still a Big 12 championship contender, and when they get to the SEC, we'll see. I'm interested to see if OU does have a disappointing season, how that how he navigates that. And I would imagine probably brings a lot of positivity, especially if it's year one and it's maybe a disappointing year compared to expectations. But I will be interested to see how he rolls with the punches, because I would imagine that he went to a master class of rolling with the punches with Dabo Sweeney, because that guy gets slandered on Twitter every day, and I'm one of them that literally will roast Dabo Sweeney every day. But I mean, I'm curious to see how he handles that in terms of just, and it's been great to see him be so good with the media and be great with the fans. Most of my exposure has kind of come from seeing him around other sports and covering OU softball as closely as I did. He was at a lot of the games, would stick around. That was the crazy thing about Brent, was he would throw out the first pitch. He threw out the first pitch at, I think it was the Saturday Bedlam game in the regular season, and he stuck around the entire time. He was pacing around. He looked genuinely just like this game hinged on a lot of, just the whole world hinged on this game. Like that's just his demeanor. And I remember that you made mention of the fact that like he's taking time to kind of get to know you all and like to be around the media, be as open as possible. And I don't know why this made me think of it, but there was this like little girl that was like trying to like get a photo with him. And Brent was just like very adamant about like just like like he was just like, yeah, like for 100% I'll do it. And like at one point like they got distracted because Brent talks so much. And like I think that the little girl thought the photo was taken, so she like went back to her mother. And Brent was like, no, we haven't taken the photo yet. And like I think, I don't know, like me personally, like I probably would have been like, all right, I'll see you later. But he was just like, no, let's get this photo, and like said her name 1,000 times. You always know, like just like he like is just very good within the community, I think. And we will see how things go with this football season, and if Oklahoma can kind of live up to you know whatever expectations you might have for them. But Austin, looking forward to senior coverage. Are you kind of? I know you're interning with the Tulsa World this summer. Has it been kind of a nice, I don't know, break? If I don't even know if that's the right word to describe it, but just like it feels like we're kind of in a cool period as far as just like sports news.
No, yeah, it's always stopping is just hard. It's nice to have a little break, but also I think I went like a week without writing a story, and I just was like, I got the itch again. I was just like, okay, I need to probably be working on something. But I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, senior year, going in with Mason, who we became, he's became one of my best friends. We came in freshman year together. Mason and I are both the sports editors for the Daily, but if you weren't aware, but I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, getting a year under my belt, I feel like I'm a little more experienced going into it, but it's definitely a nice break. It's so crazy to think that I'm a senior going into basically what's my last semester of reporting before I venture out into the world, because football ends in the spring. So it'll be interesting. It's definitely going to be an interesting season with all the changes. Not a whole lot of It's not very linear from last year, that's for sure, but I'm excited for it.
That's the
And
tough
that
part.
Lincoln trip and the West Virginia. It's the West Virginia, the travel year. So
Well, man, it's been fun to follow you and kind of see like how you're. I mean, I feel like the rookie season went off really well. I feel like the bar is really high. If you don't get another college game day mention, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed. So you're gonna have to
I'm going to
figure
try.
out how to creatively do that. I don't know how you're going to do it, but we're all the OU Daily alums are waiting for you guys to kind of one up yourselves in a way. But no, it's been fun to see you guys, and Mason Young. You guys do a great job covering OU and the whole department. I'm glad that you going a week without writing a story and you're ready to get back to the grind. I see that Seth Prince has really coached you up.